The kitchen was stifling, the kind of hot that made your blouse cling in all the wrong places and turned perfume into something sour. Eleanor sat in a folding chair, wedged between a rack of used trays and a wheeled cart with a broken leg. The scent of garlic and overcooked shrimp hung in the air, thick and greasy. Through the swinging door, just barely ajar, when a server brushed by, she could glimpse it, the chandelier-lit reception gold chairs, laughter, and her son. Her only child, Adam the groom. The dress she wore was soft mauve chiffon, hand-stitched with care and hope. She had sat for 3 hours under the hum of salon dryers, picturing herself clapping through the toasts, perhaps sharing a dance, maybe even sneaking a moment of pride with Adam between courses. Instead, she was here. Her name not printed on a single place card. Not a single greeting when she arrived. No one even looked up. Adam was laughing, all dimples and white teeth, standing beside his new wife, Camille. Camille, who never quite looked her in the eye, who once referred to her kitchen as quaint with a wrinkle of the nose. Camille, who now owned the day, every flower and detail tailored to her vision. The catering manager, a boy who looked barely old enough to drive, had fidgeted nervously as he pointed toward the back. Mrs. Halpern, the bride mentioned something about aesthetics. Theme, you know. He winced. It's just, she didn't want any visual clashes in the photos. Visual clashes. Like Eleanor was a smudge, a mistake, a relic that didn't belong in Camille's curated fairy tale. She sat quietly straightening her posture, gripping the edges of her beige leather handbag like it could anchor her to dignity. The same bag Adam gave her one Mother's Day years ago, when he still called her Mama and brought her breakfast in bed with too much syrup and cold toast. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the napkin on her lap. On her plate, a rubbery chicken breast, a lonely olive, and a limp sprig of parsley. She didn't touch it. The first dance started. Through the door, she saw Camille's dress twirl under gold lights as Adam spun her across the floor. Not once did he look her way. That's when it hit her not like a slap, but a slow press of weight on her chest. She wasn't just overlooked. She had been erased, carefully, deliberately. There was no accident here, no forgotten chair, no miscommunication. Camille didn't want her in the frame, and Adam, he let it happen. The ache wasn't new. It was the same she'd felt when Camille's mother took over the rehearsal dinner planning without asking when her own toast was politely declined when Adam laughed off her offer to help with the seating chart. Camille's got it all mapped out, Mom. Don't stress. And she didn't. Not out loud. She wore the right dress, sent the checks, smiled through every thinly veiled slight. She told herself it was Adam's day. But now, staring at a wall of peeling paint behind a fire extinguisher, she knew. It was never about the wedding. It was about being invisible, discarded. Her eyes stung, but she didn't blink. She wouldn't cry in front of catering staff and swinging doors. Instead, she reached for her phone with hands that no longer trembled. Her thumb moved steadily across the screen. 3 calls, short, direct. Hi, this is Eleanor Halpern. I need to cancel tomorrow's floral delivery. Yes, the brunch arrangements. Hi, please inform the band's second half will no longer be needed. No further payment will be processed. Hello, this is in regard to the open bar. The extended service through midnight is no longer authorized. Please confirm. She ended the final call, sat still for a moment, then slowly looked down at her hands. No more shaking. No more heat pressing against her spine. Just stillness. She didn't smile. Not yet. But inside something had shifted. Not cracked. Not broken. Shifted. And soon the whole ground would move beneath them. Eleanor didn't sleep that night. The air in her hotel room was stale, heavy with the scent of the rose lotion she'd applied hours earlier, now clinging to her skin like something artificial and mocking. Her dress still hung on the back of the chair, a quiet reminder of a role she never got to play. At 2:47 a.m., the red numbers on the digital clock burned into her eyes. She sat up, reached for her tablet, and opened the spreadsheet she'd lived in for the last 16 months. Wedding planning final budget. Color-coded tabs, itemized totals, confirmation numbers. Every cost tracked to the penny. The silence was sharp, too sharp like it was listening. She scrolled slowly, eyes darting over line items. Invitations hand calligraphed by a boutique vendor in Vermont. Venue upgraded twice to match Camille's rustic chic Pinterest board. Cake 5 tiers instead of 2, because simple doesn't photograph well. She'd nodded at every suggestion, signed every check, convinced herself it meant she was still part of Adam's life. But now the numbers didn't feel like love. They felt like evidence. Eleanor clicked to the final tab, recent transactions, and that's when she saw them 2 entries she hadn't made. A bar tab at a downtown lounge labeled tasting event. A pre-wedding dinner upgrade at the same restaurant that stuck her by the kitchen again. Her stomach twisted. She double-checked the card number. Hers. Not Camille's, not the bride's family. Hers. And below those charges, almost as if fate wanted to gut her clean, a screen-captured Venmo transaction. Camille had sent money to her bridesmaid captioned with a sparkle emoji and a line Eleanor would read 5 times, just to be sure. His mom's covering everything, might as well go big. Wedding vibes. Go big, like it was a joke. Like her sacrifices were some open buffet for Camille's dreams. Eleanor stared at the screen, heart slowing, not in fear, not in heartbreak, but in the chilling calm that comes when betrayal stops being a maybe. It was real. They used her. She exhaled steady, as if her whole body had finally accepted what her mind had been resisting. This wasn't just a snub. This was orchestrated exclusion. A slow, intentional draining of her generosity, her pride, her presence. She thought of Camille's cold smile, the way she said, "Don't worry, Margaret, you'll be included with that glossy camera-ready grin." Her name isn't Margaret, but Camille never got it right. Not once. Never tried. Eleanor stood and walked to the mirror. Her reflection startled her. Puffy eyes, lips pale. The lines on her face looked deeper in the hotel's dim yellow light. Her hair was limp on one side from the pillow. She looked like someone who'd aged a decade in a night. She ran water in the sink cold and splashed it on her face. The shock of it woke her not just physically, but to a truth that had been sitting there all along. They never intended for her to be honored, only used. Eleanor dried her face, sat back down at the desk, and began printing receipts, every payment, every deposit, every floral upgrade and catering extension. She lined them up beside her tablet, like a paper trail of her own erasure. She added the Venmo screenshot, last printed in full color. This was her receipt book, not for accounting, but for reckoning. Each page felt like a truth reclaimed, each subtotal a moment she allowed herself to be minimized. She gathered the stack and tucked it neatly into a plain manila folder. No label. She knew what it contained. So would he soon enough. Eleanor closed the spreadsheet, shut off the tablet, and finally allowed herself to lie back on the stiff bed. She didn't cry. Not anymore. Because she wasn't the one who should feel ashamed. Back home, Eleanor unpacked slowly. The house was still familiar in a way that felt foreign now, like she'd been living in it through someone else's memory. She placed her handbag on the kitchen counter, untouched since the reception. Her heels made a soft thud against the hardwood as she walked toward her bedroom, peeling off the layers of a woman who had smiled through dismissal. She didn't turn on the lights. Instead, she moved with the quiet certainty of someone on the brink of understanding something irreversible. The old dresser creaked open a drawer she rarely touched. It stuck halfway, as always. She gave it the usual bump with her hip. Inside, buried beneath decades of forgotten paperwork, expired insurance cards and half-worn receipts, was the red folder. She had seen it 100 times before, never opened it. Michael's handwriting glared back at her from the front. Her late husband's scrawl. The man who walked out the door one morning and never came back, except in legal mail and silence. She sat on the edge of her bed holding the folder like it might explode. She thought about leaving it alone, letting it yellow further, letting the past stay tucked behind wood and denial. But she opened it. The envelope was thin, aged, sealed with a single piece of brittle tape. It gave way easily. Inside was a letter. 1 page. No apology in the greeting. Just Margaret. I know you never wanted to hear from me again, but I need to tell you something. She blinked. Margaret. Again. But this time it wasn't Camille's negligence. It was intentional. Her breath caught as her eyes scanned the rest. I've been carrying a secret I can't take to the grave. You deserve the truth. Daniel, he's not biologically yours. I found out years ago. Emily was pregnant when we got together. I thought I could pretend he was mine. We never told you. I'm sorry. Eleanor stopped reading. Her hands, so steady in the hotel room, began to tremble. The letter slid to her lap. The silence in the room turned dense. It felt like the walls themselves had leaned in to hear the revelation. Daniel wasn't hers. Not biologically, not even mistakenly. She thought back to every diaper change, every ear infection, every birthday party with discount balloons and homemade cupcakes. She remembered the first time he tied his shoes, the way he cried when the dog died, how he hugged her after every piano recital, even the ones he flubbed. She remembered saving for braces instead of buying herself new glasses, how she never remarried because she didn't want to disrupt his life. She had poured everything into that boy. And now this. A truth buried in old paper, delivered too late to matter, yet arriving right on time. Her world didn't shatter. It clarified. Eleanor picked up the letter again and read it to the end. Maybe it doesn't change anything, but I wanted you to know. You raised him. You were the only real parent he ever had. For what it's worth, I'm sorry I let you carry it alone. The paper was soft at the edges. She folded it slowly, deliberately, and placed it back in the envelope. No tears. No sobbing into her hands. Just stillness. She rose, walked to the kitchen, and poured herself a glass of water. Her reflection in the window looked different, not broken, hardened, sharpened, not less of a mother, more. Because she did it all anyway, without biology, without truth, without help. She raised Daniel. She loved him past every lie, and when it mattered most, he let her sit behind a swinging door. She wasn't unraveling, she was awakening. Clarity like that doesn't shatter you, it steadies you. And Eleanor had never felt more steady in her life. By morning, Eleanor was no longer navigating grief. She was composing herself with precision. No more tiptoeing around others' comfort. No more quiet acceptance masked as grace. Her robe was wrapped, tight hair still damp from the shower face clean. No makeup, no armor, just Eleanor finally stepping into herself. She sat at the kitchen table, red folder beside her, sipping black coffee that tasted stronger than usual. Or maybe she just was. Her phone buzzed. Dozens of messages: Adam, Camille, Camille's mother, even her own sister. Some polite, others indignant, most confused. The brunch was cancelled. The band never showed, the bar closed early, and no one could get answers. Good. She opened her laptop and logged into her email. Calmly, she typed 3 new messages, one to the florist, one to the band coordinator, and one to the cocktail vendor. Please confirm final cancellation. No further action is needed. Payment is withheld as per our prior agreement. Thank you for your time. She didn't explain. She didn't ask for sympathy. She clicked send with a hand that no longer trembled. Then she opened her banking app, found the check. The check, $28,450. Signed, dated, scanned. the one she wrote 6 weeks ago to the planner that covered the last stretch of expenses Camille had called critical. She downloaded the image, blurred the account number, cropped the frame just enough to show her signature and the amount. No caption, no location tag, no hashtags, just a photo, a receipt. Then she opened Facebook, uploaded it, and clicked post. Eleanor sat back and watched the screen glow. She didn't need to scream. She didn't need to rant. The silence spoke loud enough. Within minutes, comments trickled in. "What is this? Are you okay? Is this about the wedding, Margaret? What happened?" She didn't respond. Let them speculate. Let them connect the dots Camille tried so hard to scatter. Her phone buzzed again, this time a call. Adam. She declined it. For years she had been his foundation, the one who held the camera while he took center stage, the one who drove him to SAT prep and college visits while he napped in the passenger seat, the one who clipped coupons to afford his winter coats. And when it came time for a single gesture of respect, a seat among the family, a mention in a speech, he chose to let her disappear behind the kitchen door. Not anymore. She walked into the living room and looked at the photos on the mantel. Kindergarten, first communion, prom, graduation. Her fingerprints were in all of them, not his name, not his DNA, hers. She started removing them frame by frame, not smashing, not destroying, just reclaiming. Each one she set aside felt lighter, like unclenching a fist she hadn't realized she'd been making for years. In their place, she placed a single new photo, a picture of herself from a beach trip years ago before Adam, before Camille, before motherhood consumed her. She looked carefree, windswept, laughing into the sun. Eleanor stared at it for a long time. That woman deserved to return, and she was bringing her back. Later, she pulled out her recipe box, found an old card labeled lemon butter pasta, and smiled. She'd make that tonight, just for herself. No dietary compromises, no Adam prefers red sauce adjustments, just what she wanted, how she wanted it. She opened the pantry and realized she still had honey bunches of oats, Adam's favorite. She tossed the box in the trash. It had expired anyway. Everything that no longer served her could go. The day passed quietly like the eye of a storm. Online, the post buzzed. Offline, the phone rang. But inside her home, there was peace. Eleanor no longer needed to be in the photos. She was rewriting the whole damn album. 3 days after posting the check, Eleanor stood barefoot in her kitchen, humming along to an old Van Morrison record. The counters were cluttered, not with dishes, but ingredients, vine-ripened tomatoes, fresh basil garlic bulbs, lemons, and a wedge of real Parmigiano she'd splurged on without a second thought. She was cooking for herself, for once. And for them, the ones who'd shown up in her life, not because they were obligated, but because they wanted to. The guest list wasn't long, just 6 names, handwritten on a yellow notepad, without pretense or theme. Claire from her nursing days, who once covered a double shift when Eleanor's mother fell ill. Mr. Henderson, her retired neighbor, who mowed her lawn every spring before she even asked. Dina, the quiet woman from the bookstore, who always remembered Eleanor's name and favorite authors. Nurse Janet, who had stayed late more than once, just so Eleanor wouldn't miss the last bus home. Sheila and Troy, a couple she met at a community garden project last fall, who insisted she join their Sunday potlucks after one too many lonely weekends. No one shared her blood, and that was exactly the point. She set the table with mismatched plates and cloth napkins folded into fans. A blue tablecloth printed with sunflowers stretched across the dining table she once only used to sort bills and stack laundry. Now it glowed under the warm light of string bulbs she'd hung herself. The front door opened at 5:58 p.m., right on time. "Maggie, you look radiant." Claire grinned, holding up a bottle of wine like it was a trophy. "I feel it. Eleanor replied, and for the first time in years she meant it. They trickled in with laughter and hugs, the kind of embraces that lasted long enough to settle the soul. Dina brought homemade bread. Mr. Henderson arrived with a pie from the corner bakery. Nurse Janet brought candles in tiny mason jars, one for each guest. Eleanor served lemon butter pasta with roasted cherry tomatoes and thyme-roasted vegetables. The smells wrapped around them like a wool sweater on a cold night, comforting homemade real. No one looked at their phones. No one whispered behind napkins. No one cared about aesthetics. They ate. They laughed. Stories spilled across the table. First dates gone wrong. Old job horror stories that one time Mr. Henderson got locked out of his house in nothing but socks and a bathrobe. Dina confessed she'd once faked a British accent for a whole semester in college, just to impress a guy. Eleanor's laugh rang out deep, unguarded. No performance, no pretending. For the first time, she wasn't the background character at someone else's event. She was the host, the heart of the table. As dessert was passed, peach cobbler still warm from the oven, Claire raised her glass. To Eleanor she said, voice warm with wine and sincerity, for reminding us it's never too late to reclaim your space, and to finally sitting at the head of your own damn table. Glasses clinked. Eleanor's eyes burned, not with sadness, but with something softer. Recognition, belonging. She looked around. No one had shown up for the spectacle. No one had taken from her without asking. No one had tried to reduce her to a seat in the kitchen. These people saw her, really saw her. She raised her glass slowly, to choosing joy, and to choosing people who don't make you earn love with silence. The room filled with cheers and one more round of laughter. Later that night, when the dishes were done and the chairs pushed in, Eleanor sat alone on the porch, a cup of chamomile in her hand, stars pricking the dark sky above. She wasn't waiting to be included anymore. She was creating the world she belonged in. One dinner, one truth, one real seat at a time. It was a little past noon when the knock came. Not frantic, not loud, just firm and steady. The kind of knock that didn't ask, it insisted. Eleanor stood in the hallway, heart calm, bare feet cool against the tile. She knew before she looked. Through the frosted glass of the door, his silhouette waited. Shoulders slumped, one hand stuffed into the pocket of jeans that hadn't seen an iron in days. Adam. She opened the door slowly. He looked the same but diminished. Gone was the beaming groom in a tailored tux. In his place was a man who hadn't slept, hadn't shaved, and clearly hadn't planned what to say. "Hi, Mom," he offered. Eleanor didn't say it back. She stepped aside. He hesitated, then walked in. His eyes scanned the living room. The absence hit him immediately. The photos were gone. Every childhood moment she'd once immortalized in glossy frames had vanished. The mantel stood bare. "Where are the pictures?" he asked, voice thin. She didn't answer. "Sit," she said, gesturing to the armchair across from the couch. He obeyed. The silence between them wasn't tense. It was full, heavy with unspoken history, choices, betrayals. Eleanor watched him squirm under its weight. She didn't offer tea. She didn't ask about his drive. This wasn't a reunion. It was reckoning. "I didn't come here to fight, Adam," finally said. Eleanor sat across from him, her posture composed. "Good. He ran a hand through his hair. "I don't understand what happened. One minute everything was fine, then the next you're canceling things, posting online." "That's what you want to talk about," she interrupted. "The brunch, the check, public embarrassment." His mouth opened closed. He looked lost. She stood and left the room, briefly returning with a manila folder. She placed it gently on the coffee table between them. "Open it." Inside receipts, screenshots, printouts, every dime she spent, every unauthorized charge, the Venmo message that still made her skin crawl. He flipped through the pages, the color draining from his face. Then she handed him the envelope, the letter, the one from Michael. Adam took it with shaking hands, read it silently. She watched him, saw the moment he registered the words. When he looked up, his face was pale. "You knew I do now." His voice cracked. "So, you're angry because I'm not yours?" Eleanor didn't even blink. "I'm angry because I raised you, Adam. I gave you my life. And when your moment came, when you were finally the man I had shaped," her voice sharpened, "you let them put me in the kitchen." He opened his mouth to respond, but she didn't let him. "You watched it happen. You let them erase me. You knew I wasn't in the program. You heard them say there was no seat for me, and you said nothing." He bowed his head. "Camille said it would be better for the pictures. She said you'd understand." Eleanor laughed. A cold, hollow thing. She was right about one thing, she said. "I do understand. I understand that you let her make me invisible. That the woman who raised you, who stood in every fire for you, wasn't worth a chair by your side." "I'm sorry," he whispered. She stood, walked to the mantel, held up one of the empty frames. "This used to be you in your kindergarten cap, grinning at me from the stage." She placed it down, glass side down. "That little boy is gone." Adam stood, panic in his eyes. "Mom, no," she said. "Firm, final. I'm not your wallet. I'm not your safety net. I'm not your ghost." She picked up the folder, placed it in his arms. "These are yours now, all of it. The records, the reminders, the weight." He didn't move. She walked to the door, held it open. Adam looked at her one last time, searching for softness for the familiar woman who used to soothe every ache. But she wasn't there. Eleanor nodded toward the door. He walked out, and she closed it behind him. Quiet, firm, like it would stay closed. The house felt different after Adam left. Not haunted, not hostile, just lighter. Like a heavy curtain had been lifted and sunlight was finally seeping through the cracks that had been there all along. Eleanor stood in the hallway facing the gallery of memories she had once so carefully curated. Dozens of frames in mismatched colors holding years of snapshots. Adam's first steps, his braces the time he won second place in the science fair. Even that blurry one from the college dorm move-in day. Each photo had once been sacred. Now they were something else entirely. A shrine to a role she had outgrown. She started at the far end, reaching up and taking down the framed photo of Adam at age 10, gap-toothed and beaming with chocolate frosting on his nose. She remembered the day vividly she'd worked a double shift to buy that bakery cake. He'd hugged her so tight, she thought her ribs might crack. Back when love was loud and uncomplicated. She turned the frame over, removed the photo, slid it into a folder marked Memories Keep, not trash, not destruction, just transition. She moved down the hallway one frame at a time. Her fingers were steady, her breath slow. No tears came, not even when she reached the graduation photo, Adam in a cap and gown, arms flung around Camille, his other arm hanging limply at his side, just inches from Eleanor's shoulder. She'd cropped herself out of the digital version she shared. She'd told herself it was fine that the memory mattered more than her placement. But now she saw it clearly for what it was, erasure with a polite smile. She boxed that one too, and the next, and the next. By the time she reached the last frame, Adam as a toddler asleep on her chest, his tiny fists curled against her collarbone, her arms were full. She sat down on the couch, a pile of wood and glass on her lap, and took one long look. She didn't feel hatred. She didn't feel regret. She felt release. Eleanor stood and placed the box in her closet next to her winter boots and an old tin of Christmas lights. She labeled it not with dates, not with his name, but with a single word, past. Then she walked back into the living room. Her walls were blank now. empty in a way that begged to be filled, but not with what had been. She opened a drawer and pulled out an old photograph of herself, taken on a weekend trip with friends long before marriage, before motherhood. She was seated on a picnic blanket, laughing with her head thrown back, hair wild in the wind. Someone had caught her mid-laugh. She looked radiant. She framed it, hung it, center wall. Then she added another photo, one from the recent dinner with Claire and Mr. Henderson and Dina. A shot someone had taken candidly where Eleanor was reaching across the table, candlelight soft on her face, eyes lit with something real. That was the new gallery. 2 frames. Her joy. Her now. No more pretending that motherhood had to mean martyrdom. No more devoting walls, space, and breath to a boy who couldn't offer a chair in return. She poured herself a glass of wine, leaned back into her favorite chair, and let the quiet settle. It wasn't loneliness. It was freedom. She looked at her new wall, simple, honest. Not a timeline of sacrifice, but a celebration of survival, of self. The last picture wasn't of Adam. It was of Eleanor living, breathing, choosing herself finally. Eleanor woke to the sound of birdsong drifting in through the open window. Not the shrill alert of an alarm clock or the weight of a message waiting to be read. Just birds. The soft coo of morning peace. Her room was bathed in pale gold light, the kind that made even the ordinary feel a little sacred. She stretched slowly, deliberately, as if giving her body permission to be at ease. For the first time in weeks, maybe years, there was no weight pressing on her chest, no schedule scribbled in the margins of her day. No calls from Adam, no explanations demanded, no apologies offered, and she was perfectly fine with that. She slipped into her robe and padded barefoot to the kitchen, where the scent of lavender still lingered from last night's candle. The house was quiet, not empty, peaceful, the kind of quiet that hummed with contentment instead of waiting. The kettle whistled, and she poured herself a mug of dark roast. Black hot, no sugar, just the way she liked it. She walked to the porch, her favorite place, and sank into the old wooden rocker that creaked just slightly when she leaned back. The garden bloomed wildly. Roses, untamed and brilliant, had burst open in every corner. Sunlight kissed their petals like a promise, like they had bloomed just for her. Eleanor took a sip of coffee and let it warm her from the inside out. This was hers. Not borrowed, not begged, not granted through someone else's permission. Hers. The dinner from a few nights ago still played through her mind, how they laughed over wine and wiped their mouths with cloth napkins she'd ironed herself. How Claire toasted to her courage, how everyone leaned in when she spoke, not because they were obligated, but because they wanted to hear her voice. It wasn't a holiday or an event. It was her life, her new beginning. She thought of Adam briefly, and the way he had looked standing in her doorway, that hesitation in his eyes. She didn't feel anger, not anymore. She felt distance necessary, earned. He might circle back someday, or he might not. But she was no longer orbiting around his choices. The truth still sat in her desk drawer, the letter, the receipts, the evidence of years spent giving and giving, only to be told she didn't belong. But those papers weren't chains anymore. They were reminders. She had raised a child who was never hers by blood, loved him so deeply he never questioned if he was wanted. She had bent herself to become every role, every solution, every safety net. And still, when given the choice, he let her fade. But she didn't disappear. She reclaimed her space, her time, her voice. She had turned the kitchen chair into a throne, not by demand, but by decision. She looked out over the roses and smiled, not a performance smile, not the polite kind, but a deep private smile that started in her chest and radiated outward. She was done being convenient, done being the blank space others filled with their needs. Eleanor sipped her coffee, breathed in the scent of earth and petals, and felt her shoulders drop. The world didn't feel heavy, it felt open. No messages, no drama, just her. A woman no longer waiting for a place at someone else's table, because she had built her own. She set her mug down on the side table, wiped a single stray crumb from her robe, and watched as a robin darted across the lawn. There was no sadness here, only truth and quiet joy. And then, as the sun rose higher and the breeze rustled the leaves, she whispered aloud to no one in particular, but maybe to every version of herself that had come before, I wasn't someone's backdrop anymore. I was the main character in my own life. And finally, that was enough.